Now let's take a look at how to build a chat application layout using Grid and Flexbox. Let's look at a sample layout first. On a small screen, this is what the chat application looks like. Just a list of conversations, just a list of contacts and recent messages. And on a larger screen, it expands to reveal a chat window on the right side. So let's begin by making the mobile layout. Let's begin by doing the Flexbox layout. We're going to add an HTML file, CSS file called appflex, and another CSS file with shared code called appbase. We're going to call it chat. And let's start by writing the markup. Now, because this is an application layout, the markup here is going to be significantly more complex than a layout that is simply just content. For example, the portfolio layout or the news application layout. So let's begin by adding a container. Inside the container, I'm going to have two divs. One of them will be called contacts, and the other one will be called app chats. Within the contacts div, I'm going to have a list of contacts. And instead of calling it app contact, I'm going to call it app message for reasons that will become clear in a minute. Each message is going to have an image, which will be the avatar of the user that you're chatting with. The image will be followed by something called app message contents. This will have a div called app sender and another one called app message text. And at the end of all of this, we're going to have another element called timestamp. So this is what each message in our contact list is going to look like. Let's come to this chats component in a bit. Let's first style this one. So now I'm going to fill this markup with some dummy data. Let's see what that looks like. App sender contains a sender name. App message text contains some message. And the timestamp contains the timestamp when the message was sent. The image is just an avatar image, and I'm using a placeholder for that. And I'm going to give it a class called app avatar. And that's what my dummy data looks like. Let's see what this looks like on the page. All right. So let's populate this page with a bunch of dummy data like this, so we can start styling it. And let's copy this message a couple of times. Let's edit this data so it looks more realistic. So now we filled our page with a bunch of dummy content, and let's see what that looks like in the browser. It looks like something like this. Now let's begin by adding some base styles to this page. We're going to add our box sizing rules. We're going to set some properties on the body. Let's use a 16-pixel font size, a sans serif typeface, line height of 1.5, and no margin, no padding. So now we have this. Let's add some styles to that avatar image. Let's make it circular with a border radius of 50%. And let's pull this style sheet into a page which we haven't done yet. So now this is what our page looks like. Let's also add the meta tag. Right. Now let's start styling the app message class. We wanted to have a background color. No. We wanted to have a padding of about 5 VW. And we want the avatar to be a little smaller. Let's say 3 rem, maybe 5 rem. We want the sender name to be bold. And we want the message to have a bottom border. Let's say a 1 pixel solid border that is silver in color. Also, only for, let's do this later. Right. So now we have all our common code. Let's start laying things out using Flexbox. So first, let's pull our appflex.css into our page. Then let's once again start styling the message first. We're going to give it a display property of flex. We are fine with the flex direction of row, and we are also fine with a flex wrap of no wrap. So this is what everything looks like now, which is pretty close to how we want it anyway. We should probably add a height to the avatar as well. And a margin of 1 rem. Now we want this message to take up all the space, all the remaining space, if we have any extra space left in our flex container. So for this, we're going to say app message content flex1. So now the message content takes pretty much all the space in this container, pushing the avatar image as well as a timestamp to the corners. Let's go easy on that padding. Maybe increase this size. And there we have it. This is our layout on mobile. So now let's start building this layout for a larger screen. Let's begin by defining a media query. And let's populate our app chats section. So our app chat section, let's take a look at the reference layout, has a header and a bunch of messages after that. So let's add a div called app chat header, which has some text inside it, which is going to be the sender name. And then app chat content, which is going to have a bunch of messages. So for example, I'm just going to copy over one of the existing messages from up here and paste it down into this. And let's see what this looks like for a second. So we have all our contact list followed by this bunch of random text. So let's begin by populating this entire chat, and then let's start adding the layout to it. So now let's take a look at what the page looks like. You have your entire contact list up here. But if you scroll down, you see this unstyled content, which is supposed to be the chat window itself. So let's start styling this. We have our media query, and we're going to say app container. display flex, and we're gonna keep the default values of flex direction row and flex wrap no wrap. Within that, we're gonna say app contacts flex 1 and app chats flex 2. So now the contacts are taking up 33% of the space on the screen, and the chat is taking up about 66% of the space. Let's see what this looks like. Right, still a lot of unstyled content. So let's also add a right border to app contacts. So now we have this, and let's start by styling this header. App chat header. We're going to give it a height of about 3 VH, and we're going to give it a background color of silver. Let's bump this up to 5 VH. In fact, let's use an REM unit instead. And now let's center the text vertically as well as horizontally within this. So once again, we're going to do display flex, align item center, justify content center. And there we have it. Now let's fix the sizing on these avatar images inside of the chat. And we want them to be smaller than the ones shown on the contact side. So we're going to say 3 rem, 3 rem. That's a way more reasonable size. Now let's add an active class to the currently selected conversation, which in our case is this one at 10:44 a.m. But because a selected conversation only makes sense in the context of this desktop layout, not in the case of the mobile layout, we are going to add it inside the media query. So let's add a class called app message active, and in here give it a background color of silver. So now this indicates that this particular conversation is selected. I think we have too much padding on the messages. So let's just give them a padding of left and right. I like to be explicit when it comes to padding values and not use shorthands because it's much clearer, even if it means more repetition. And let's also reduce the margin on the avatar and only have a margin right. Much more reasonable. So now we have our layout on the desktop, and we also have our layout on mobile, but there's a problem. If on the mobile we scroll down, we still see this entire chat section. So let's hide this. Max width of 900 pixels, and let's say app chats display none. So now on a smaller screen, all you see is the contacts list. Let's also give a maximum height to app contacts. And let's say 100% of the view height, and to app chats as well. And let's just club these together. And give them an overflow property of scroll. Refresh the page. The mobile layout does not change, but on the desktop view, both of these sections can now scroll independently of each other, just like Telegram on the web or WhatsApp on the web. And let's compare it to our reference layout. And looks like we are pretty close. So on a smaller screen, all you see is your list of your contacts. And on a larger screen, you see your contacts plus the currently selected conversation. And we accomplished all of this in about 50 lines of code. So that's how you can build an application layout using Flexbox. So now let's look at how to make the chat application layout using CSS Grid layouts. Let's create a directory for the grid. And I'm going to copy over my markup because we're not going to be changing anything in the markup. And I'm going to add a new CSS file called appgrid.css, which will contain our grid-specific code. In my markup, I'm going to change these file paths to point to the correct paths, and nothing else changes. So now let's go to the browser and see what our layout looks like without the markup. Something like this. So let's begin by making the mobile layout. Small screen. Let's begin by styling the individual messages. So app message, we'll display it as grid. And our grid is going to have 3 columns, one for the avatar, one for the username and the message, and one for the timestamp. And we want the column that contains the username and the message to take up all the free space that we have horizontally, and we want the avatar and the timestamp to be on the left and the right respectively, and we want them to be as small as possible. So we're going to say grid template columns auto 1FR auto. So let's see what we did here. We've told the browser to give us 3 columns. The leftmost column, which is going to contain the avatar, is going to be as large as its contents. And the rightmost column as well is going to be as large as its contents, because both of these are set to auto. And the remaining space is going to be distributed to one column. To the remaining column, the center column, is going to be as large as whatever space remains in the center, which is 1FR. So this gives us the kind of layout we want for our chat message. So now let's move on to defining our rows. And we just want a single row, and we don't care what happens, so we're just going to say grid template rows auto. So now let's see what happens. We are already very close to our ideal layout. Everything is set up correctly, and there's nothing much that needs to be done for the contact list itself. We still need to hide the chat, the details, the detailed chat view at the bottom of the screen. So let's do that. Let's write a media query. And max width is 900 pixels as usual. And we're going to say app chats display none at this width. Let's refresh. And there we have it. This is our mobile layout. We don't need to do anything else. Now let's build this layout for the larger screen. Now increasing the screen size, everything still looks the same, and now we have this bunch of chat details at the bottom. Let's break up our page into 2 columns, beginning with the media query. Our min width is going to be 901 pixels. And we're going to say app container display grid, and grid template columns is going to be 1FR, 2FR, which means that the left side of the screen, where the contact list is going to be about 33% of the total screen width, and the right side of the screen, which is going to contain the chat details, is going to be approximately 66%. Once again, this is very similar to the flex property in Flexbox, but there are minor differences between the two. Anyway, so grid template rows is auto again, because we don't care about the number of rows we have. Let's refresh this. All right. So we already have this layout. Let's style the header. And we're going to give it a background color of silver, a height of 3 rem. See what that looks like. Now let's center that text. So we're going to say justify content center. Align content center. Oops. So now let's begin by styling that header. We're going to give it a background color of silver, a height of 3 rem, and then we are going to center the text both vertically and horizontally. So we're going to say display grid, align items center, justify items, also center. So now our header text is exactly in the center. Let's add a right border to the contacts list. But only on large screens. Solid, 1 pixel, silver. There you have it. Now, let's make these two sections scroll independently. So only on large screens, app contacts is going to have a height of 100 VH, and app chats is also going to have, we can club these together, VH and overflow of scroll. Save it, and now we have both our sections scrolling independently. So if I drag this up, drag it up, both our sections independently scroll. Now let's add an active class to this particular conversation. And the active class only makes sense in the context of a larger screen. So let's find Pratul here. We already have the app message active class up here. So all we need to do is say app message active. Background color is going to be, once again, silver. Now let's go back and refresh this, and there you have it. So on a large screen, you've got your contacts list on the left with the chat details appearing in a main window on the right, but as you scale the screen down, it all collapses into a single long list. And that's how to build a chat application layout using CSS Grid.